Hi everybody, Carmen here with Quality Sewing, and for this week's How Do I, we are going to learn how do I learn to quilt. So now I don't know about you, but I love piecing, right? I love taking all of those colors and making these beautiful quilt tops. But if you're like me, you might also be a little intimidated about how to actually quilt it, right? How do you take that beautiful quilt top that you've already made and you put your batting in and you put your backing and then you quilt it? Because this, for a lot of people, is really intimidating and it feels really fun to make quilt tops, but then they get a little bit hung up on how do we actually do the quilting because you don't want to ruin your project, right? So today I'm going to go through a very little bit about piecing and then I'm going to talk through some of the techniques that I use or that you can use when you are quilting. So what I've created for today is a little baby quilt. And I would really recommend doing something like this for yourself. If you have never actually quilted a quilt, and quilting is defined as where you're taking your top that you've made, you have your batting and you have your backing, right? This is quilting. And if you've never done that before, I highly recommend making some little test mini quilts. You could turn them into table runners or placemats later, or pot holders. You can do a lot of fun things with these things, but then you get a moment to practice on some actual fabric that looks more like a quilt that you might have and build some confidence without feeling like that sort of intimidation of, oh no, what if I ruin my quilt? And so that's what we're gonna do today. So the first thing I have set up here is I'm on the beautiful Baby Lock Chorus. And I do love, if you're really into quilting, I highly recommend having a machine that has a large chassis here. Because if you really are trying to get that whole quilt in here, let's maybe say you have, even a baby size quilt is pretty big, right? Or a twin size quilt, that is a lot of fabric because you got that top, you have the batting, you have the backing. And I love how this machine has over 10 inches of space here from the needle to the side. And then it also comes with a lovely extension table. An extension table is super helpful no matter what machine you have, and you can actually get an extension table for pretty much every machine out there. You can get the ones that come from the brands that are often white like this, or you can get the clear acrylic ones that are so steady, and those are custom cut for your machine. So no matter how new or old your machine is, you can get a beautiful extension table that gives you more space and makes it easier to manage that large fabric. So first of all here, I have my machine set up, and the first thing we're just going to talk about is piecing, because part of what helps us be successful in quilting is some of the basics of how we've put the top together. So the first thing, we know that we need everything to be as straight as possible, so that way our points line up and our blocks look beautiful, right? So first we have to cut it really well, right? Number one. And that's a whole different segment on how to cut a quilt. We're not going to go into that today. But first you cut it straight. But the next thing is sewing it straight. And I wanted to show you the 1/4 inch foot. And maybe I put it down here. The 1/4 inch foot is one of my favorite feet because it has this great little flange. See if you can see it there on the side, this flange there. And so what it does is it allows me, as I am sewing, to just keep that flange lined up to the edge of my fabric here. And then I get a perfect 1/4 inch every time. So let's just snap this guy on. Let me show you how that works. And I love the flange because it's just so helpful. So you can see here, I have a little charm pack. And what's fun about little charm packs is it's already pre-cut. So it's great for something like this when you want to just make a little practice quilt. So I have my fabric lined up here on the edges, and then I am gonna just line, I'm just on my straight stitch, and I'm just gonna line my fabric up to that edge and sew away, and I'm just keeping a perfect 1/4 inch. And then if I wanna do another one, I do love for speed doing piecing like this where I don't even take it out. I just sort of start again, and I can just keep just going on and on until I'm all done, and then I would cut my threads. And then I can just cut these guys apart and flip them over. And of course, now I would want to do you guys like our new overhead camera? I'm pretty excited about this. Isn't this fun? Ooh, okay. So Now, of course, you would have to do some ironing. I do love being set up for quilting where I have my ironing station next to me over here because we're going to want to iron these guys flat. You're going to want to iron those seams open on the back here, and then we could sew these guys together. And over here on my ironing station, I have a wool pressing mat, which I love because it is great. This is a really lovely one. It's wool on one side. It has a cutting surface on the other, so if you need to square something up as you're quilting, it's all right there. And then I just have this really lovely Panasonic iron. This is one of the cordless Panasonic irons. So the base charges, and then you can just use the iron and really easily turn and press, which is super helpful when you're quilting because there is a lot of pressing, because if you're pressing more, you're going to have straighter seams, and if you're pressing as you go, it's going to really help for the quilting process, because if your lines are not all lined up, it makes some of the quilting a little bit harder to do. And so these are some good tips for just the piecing portion. But let's get into what the meat of this presentation is, which is going to be about different ways for actually quilting, okay? So you can sort of see how I built my little sandwich here. So I just used those cute little charm packs and made myself some really colorful area and some little white patches, so I have some different space to work with. So the first thing, we're not going to go super in depth on this right now, but the first thing is, how do you set up your top and your batting and your backing, okay? So there's a couple of different techniques. This is so tiny, I have not attached it in any way. But if you have a really large quilt, you know, even anything really larger than this, you're going to want to attach these three things together, okay? And there's a couple of different ways to do this. One of the ways, a very traditional way, would be to use a safety pin. And so a safety pin, and I meant to pull my Wonder pins out because they're by Clover, and they just hook in here and they sort of like lock themselves. So they're much easier than a traditional safety pin. But what you're going to want to do is you would want to lay this out, and you would want to start in the very center, and you're going to want to put a pin about every distance of a fist apart. Okay, and that's going to hold your fabric all together, because then when you begin quilting, you're also going to try to start in the center and work out, so that way everything pushes, it's pushing out to the edges and everything is nice and flat and smooth. Another way that I've also done this is I have used a spray adhesive. So you can also use a spray adhesive and spray, or the fusible product from Quilter Select, Free Fuse. Thank you, my team is helping me. I might need more coffee this morning, I don't know. Or you can use Free Fuse, that works really well. And Free Fuse I actually like better than a spray adhesive, because a spray adhesive, as you might imagine, you're like, psh, and it goes everywhere. And so I would recommend doing it outside if you're going to do it, or on cardboard, because literally it is sticky and it will get everything sticky. But what's really cool about the Free Fuse is you just shake it on, and then you put this on here, and you just salt it. It's not like you're not pouring it on, right? You're salting it like it's a spice or something. And then you would take it over to your iron, and you would just iron it, and then it would be attached. And what's beautiful about Free Fuse is it doesn't leave like residue. So that is one of the easier things to do. You know, it depends how big the quilt is, if you're going to Free Fuse it, if you're going to use safety pins or those Clover Wonder pins. But you're going to want to get this secure in some way. Okay, and you can also see here that this was done on purpose, that my batting and my back is bigger than my top. And that's because as you are quilting a quilt, it is very likely that things are going to shift, and you want to make sure that you have enough batting and you have enough backing. Because once you get all done quilting it, you will square the whole thing, and then it will be beautifully square, and then you can bind it. Now, if you're wondering about binding, Reva is going to be doing a binding video soon, because I was like, ooh, if we're going to talk about quilting, the next step would be binding, but that like is its own how do I. So look for that in the coming weeks. Okay, but let's just get started here. So we have our little quilt sandwich here, and I am going to put on my Move It foot. So this is a digital walking foot, and this walking foot here, it's called a Move It foot, and Brother and Baby Lock have this, and it's a digital walking foot. And what I love about this walking foot, now what a walking foot does is it's going to help, this guy has this little feeder right here that's going to help hold all of your layers of fabric together like this. And so what's cool about this guy though is you can put different feet on it, okay? Now therefore, for a lot of machines, there are some new walking feet called interchangeable walking feet. And what that means is it is a walking foot that has different tips that you can put on it. So like Brother has one, I know Viking has one. There's quite a few different ones out there. And of course the Brother feet fit most baby locks as well. And so you aren't just limited to only using a walking foot. For years we were just like, if you wanted to use a walking foot, you could only use a walking foot. But now there's these cool walking feet that allow you to put different feet on. So for instance, this is the standard foot. The foot I'm gonna put on when I get started here is my stitch in the ditch foot. Now my stitch in the ditch foot is super cool. I love stitching in the ditch because it's such a fail-safe, easy way. It has a big flange here in the middle, okay? And so when I start sewing, I am just gonna go right down my seam, and it's just gonna keep me right in that ditch and give me a beautiful straight line. Now you can see there's gonna be a bit of a theme here. I'm using a lot of feet and tools to help make my quilting easier. And what's awesome is there are so many more feet and tools than we've ever had before. So let me just get this foot on here now. We gotta take off my, I have this guy, actually I'm gonna take off my whole shank here, and we're gonna put on my digital dual feed foot here. Now the other thing that I'd like to mention is some machines have built-in dual feed, okay? So if you have a Bernina, some Genomes, most of the Fofs, they have an integrated, not all of them, but most of them have an integrated dual feed system. So they have a little foot that comes up the back, it's built into the back of your sewing machine, and you can use all of your different feet with that. So it's sort of like how this guy has the different feet you can put on it. If you have one of those machines, you're not limited. You have basically a built-in walking foot all the time when you want it, and you can use all of those cool accessory feet like the stitch in the ditch foot. Okay, so now I'm just gonna snap on my stitch in the ditch foot here. What was that? Oh, and I gotta plug it in. My team is so good. This guy, since it is digital, it does need some power. So we got the power on there. Okay, and so then what we're gonna do is we are just going to pick a spot. I think I'm just gonna go straight down the middle here. Now, one of the questions people ask me is what kind of thread do you use for quilting, okay? So right now I'm using a Quilter Select thread. I don't know if you probably can't see it, but it's just a gray spool. And I'm using gray for the moment. So when you're quilting like this, you can choose what you want. So like when I'm piecing, I oftentimes use a gray thread because then it just sort of works for all of my colors. It's a neutral. I often just use sort of a neutral color for piecing. And then for quilting, sometimes I'm going to use a really bright color because I really want people to see my stitches, right? And there's other times where maybe particularly if you feel like you're newer to quilting, it can be really nice to pick colors that match the color of your quilt. So that way the stitching gives the texture, but you don't see the stitches as much because then, you know, if some little part isn't quite perfect, nobody's ever gonna notice. This is like, I really think is true for almost all sewing. I don't know if you've ever looked at your ready-made garments, they are not perfect. And it's okay if yours is not perfect. It's more important that you've had fun making it. And of course, like anything, the more you do something, you're gonna get better at it. But if you use tone-on-tone fab colors, right, then you're not gonna see the stitches as much. So this is really a preference for you. I'm using a 60 weight Quilter Select thread that is it has a polyester core with cotton wrapped around the top of it. I really like it. It's very reliable. It's not linty. And it's a really lovely thread. So, okay, so I'm getting this set up here. And you can see I have my little flange here lined up to the middle. And so I'm just gonna lower my presser foot. Now, when you are doing quilting like this, when you're gonna be quilting off the edge, you don't actually need to lock your stitch. You could lock your, if you were doing, there's gonna be some moments where I'll talk about how we should lock our stitch, but in this case, I'm going edge to edge, when I bind this, right, it's all gonna be encased. So I don't really need to lock my stitch. You could if you wanted, and if you did want to, this machine has a really nice feature where I'm gonna tell it to automatically tie off at the beginning for me. I can tell it to raise my presser foot, cut my threads. This machine also has a laser, which is pretty sweet. So I just turned my laser on. That's also going to help me. And you'll see that here in a second when I start sewing. I don't know if you can, there's a laser. I'm not quite sure if you guys, oh, there you can see it when I put it on see that laser there? So this is also sort of slick. This machine has a built-in laser, and there are machines with lasers. And what's great about that is not only do I have the flange of this foot helping me, but now I'm gonna have the laser helping me, telling me where to go straight, okay? So I'm gonna flip it back this way so I do actually go straight. And then I'm just gonna start sewing. It's gonna do that little tie off. And then I'm just gonna keep this lined up in my ditch. And it's sort of like driving. You wanna look like a little further ahead. Because then you're going to go straighter, if that makes sense. You actually don't want to watch your needle. But then I don't know if you can see this. I'll pull it over here maybe, or I can flip it up like this. But it has just gone like perfectly straight. On the back, you can see my one line here. And it is just perfectly straight into my ditch. So I love this technique because you can add a ton of texture and you have something to follow, right? Like stitch in the ditch is great. You can also use it when you have your borders down each side of your border, right? So stitch in the ditch can be a really fun, easy way to quilt. Let's do one more here. I'm going to do it on this side. So I'm just sort of going to make my corners, and we'll just start one more here and keep it lined up right in the middle there. Super easy. One of my favorite, really easy techniques. Okay, so now let's talk about some other techniques for quilting, okay? So we have this guy right here. Now what's fun about this foot that I just took off is there's also an open toe foot. So like one of the techniques you could do, you could draw something. I'm not gonna show that. That's not my best thing, but if you can always draw something on here and follow it, and the open toe foot can be nice for that. I just love how you can put all of these different feet on. But now we're going to talk about a couple of the other, and actually, why don't I do one more? I realized I wanted to show one more thing with this guy. We're gonna use this foot. So one of the other things you could do is, actually we'll do it this way, is you could also, when you're quilting, do a line that is dividing your block up. So I don't know if you can see it here. Like I'm just gonna do a line that comes straight down here and divides my block up, and I'm just using the sort of the point to point in my little blocks. And these are small enough that I don't really need to mark it. Now I could, of course, I could take a ruler and I could use a little chalk marker and I could just draw a line to follow, or because this is so small, I can just follow it point to point. And in this case, I think I'm gonna use my stitch in the ditch foot, and then also I have my laser helping me, and which is great because then I don't have to take the time to mark it. And so then I'm just going to start sewing again and just keep that lined up. And the laser is really helpful for this because it keeps me just lined up, and I'm just going down there, and now I've added this texture to. And then you can see here, I've just added some nice texture to that, to that little block, right? And so now this is totally changing the way this looks because of the texture I've added. You could then go the other direction if you wanted, right? All sorts of different things. So there's lots of fun stuff you can do with straight lines. And so oftentimes straight lines are the easiest thing to get started with. So stitch in the ditch, following some shape on your quilt, those are super easy. So the next level of quilting is doing some form of free motion. So that's what we're gonna show next. I'm gonna take off my walking foot and set it aside, and we are gonna put on the free motion quilting foot. Now the one I've picked here is an open toe free motion quilting foot. I don't know if we can see it there. Okay, so this is an open toe free motion quilting foot because I like to be able to see where my needle is. There are metal versions of this. There are clear versions of this. There are open toe, there are closed toe, there are wide, there are narrow. These are like literally, there's a ton of different choices. I sort of like a metal one, and I like an open toe. So for me, the open toe is big just because then I can see where my needle's going, and it has a better visibility. So I think open toe is actually the part that I like the most. Okay, so we're just gonna put this guy on here. Now with all of these sort of feet, there are these feet, this particular foot like comes with this machine because it's designed for quilting. But if your machine doesn't come with a free motion quilting foot, there's tons of different ones by all of the different brands. And generally you're gonna have to unscrew it and take off your like snap-on shank and put it on, if that makes sense. Okay, so now I'm gonna turn my laser off because it's not gonna help me in this process. I'm gonna tell my sewing machine that I am doing free motion. Now, if you have this sewing machine just has a button right here. Now for most machines, you have to tell the machine that you are doing free motion because then you need to lower your feed dogs. So this machine does it automatically for me when I tell it that I'm doing free motion. Other machines, you're going to have to physically lower your feed dogs. And oftentimes that's somewhere on like this side of the machine, or it can be over here, somewhere on the machine underneath this table, there's often a spot where you flip it. I think this machine has it maybe over here. But this machine's great because it's digital and it just does it for me, right? I tell it. Okay, so now for free motion quilting, this is definitely one of the things that I think takes them a lot of practice. Or maybe some people are just maybe naturally super good at it. It's definitely something that I struggle with. But what we're gonna do is we're just gonna turn the machine on and I'm gonna basically just go like this around and make little twirly things. Now you could do some that are, there's a couple different, some people in quilting say that you should never have your thread lines cross, and some people say it's okay. So sometimes I will do little whirlies where they're actually crossing because I actually find that a little bit easier for me to just sort of do like whirlies all over, and it's sort of fun. Or you can do more traditional stippling, which is gonna be more like this, and you're not gonna have your lines ever touch. They're just gonna sort of wiggle in and out and around each other and create this texture. Now, on this machine and on most machines, when we are in free motion mode, it means that our stitch lengths, so for all of this other stuff, I have just had a stitch length of like 2.5 or 3, and it's been on a straight stitch. But for this now, even though my machine is on that same straight stitch, my stitch length is going to be determined by how fast or how slow I am moving my fabric compared to how fast or slow my needle is moving. Now I don't know if you've noticed here, but right now I'm not using a foot control. I've been using the start-stop button. Now of course you could use your foot control, and sometimes in free motion I actually like being able to use my foot control. It's the one, I almost never use a foot control, but oftentimes for free motion I do, just because it gives me the ability to change the speed with my foot. So if I'm going in a spot where I need to move slower because I need to turn a corner or something, then I can slow my speed down versus a time that I want to go faster because I'm like in my groove and I can go faster. But this is why you want to practice it. Now there are some machines that have stitch regulators. So what a stitch regulator is going to do is for this free motion, no matter how fast or slow you go, the machine will make sure the needle moves at the right rate so your stitch length remains the same. So like Bernina's have stitch regulators, the new Brother Avenir and Baby Lock Radiance have built-in stitch regulators. The Janome M17, there's another Janome, the M8 that has a stitch regulator. So there are definitely some machines out there that have stitch regulation as an option, but if you don't have that on your machine, you're just gonna wanna play with it and figure out what works well for you, which is why I really recommend making a little testing and just playing and seeing what you like and what you don't like. Because there really, there's no one way to quilt a quilt. Okay, so I'm lowering my presser foot, of course, and then I am just going to get started here, and I am just going to be sort of just doing my little loop-de-loos, and away I go, and I'm just sort of going around, right? And I would just keep doing this, making little shapes and little twirlies until I have filled this little square, okay? And of course, you can do this however you want and in whatever way, but we're gonna stop. So you sort of have the idea there. I've just sort of gone around and stippled it. And this could look wildly different depending on how tight I make my stipples, right? How close they are together, how big. You can make them really big, as in like far apart, or closer together. The whole reason, which we didn't talk about at the beginning, but the whole reason why you're quilting to start with is because you need to have those 3 layers held together more than just the outside, right? You need to be able to hold it, and it gives that really great texture. So depending on the end result you're looking for, you can choose how big or how small to make those stipples. Like sometimes you'll see when you go to a quilt show, you'll see these like tiny, amazing, perfect stipples, and you're like, I have no idea how someone did that, right? I'm so impressed when I see, when I go to the different quilt shows and see the amazing craftsmanship. But everybody started here, right? Everybody started with just like, hey, I haven't done this. Let's see how it goes. And then, you know, you can get really good when you just practice it. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you here is another technique using a ruler, okay? Because sometimes maybe free motion feels like a little too much, but you want to use a little ruler for help. And there's a lot of different rulers out there. Basically, for every machine now, you can get a ruler work foot. And I'll put this foot down here so you can see it. And this foot is a nice little chubby foot here. And what this foot is going to do is we're going to actually drive around this ruler, and you can see how this fat foot, the reason why the foot has to be so fat is because it's lined up here with the size of this ruler. And we're going to use this to guide a shape. So that way now I don't have to guide, I'm not using, you know, I'm still using my machine, but it's different than trying to do it with like a normal foot, because I'm just going to use the ruler and create that shape. So let's change and put this foot on here. Okay, and this foot, you can see here, this guy actually has a slider. And the reason for this is so that way, if you were using a different size ruler, you could have some adjustability. So we have to actually take the whole screw out to get this guy on, slide it up here, get the screw back in, which is always harder when you're on screen than when you do it at home, right? Okay, so I have that all set up there, and I just have it at its highest height. And then what we are going to do is I'm just gonna do a little, maybe I'll do it like this way. It might be the easier way to show you. I am just going to go along here and use the curve of this ruler to give me a curve on my quilt, okay? So I'm just gonna start here, and I'm just driving that foot along the edge of this ruler, okay? And I could, you know, go into the next section or stop, right? And then go to the next part. And then I could go here and I could do like another line, right? And you could just use the ruler to create your shapes. Now, once again, because this is set up a lot like free motion, the faster you go, the faster the needle can go. So the slower you go, I often find like I didn't slow myself down there, but I should have. When I'm using rulers, I'm not really fast, so I slow myself down so I can sort of get a better stitch length. But you can see here how this ruler has curvy shapes, right? This ruler has a nice curve shape. Let me get into the right spot so you can see it. Or it also has a straight edge. And there's lots of different rulers, and some people use the rulers all the time because there's basically like any shape you can think of, there is a ruler for it. This one is just really basic. It's probably one of the more basic ones because you have a straight line, you have a curve. If you want to test and see if you like ruler work, this is a good one to start with because you can be like, okay, yes, that was easy. And there's some that are incredibly complicated. And Westerly, Amanda Murphy, Handy Quilter, they all make a lot of these different rulers, and you can use them for quilting. So those are the different techniques that I wanted to go over with you today. So lots of different ways for you to learn to quilt. What I really recommend doing is make yourself like a little mini quilt. You could make it bigger than this, of course, but then you can go and you can play with all of the different techniques and see which ones resonate for you, which ones you find easiest. Sometimes it's also dependent on what your quilt looks like, right? Because sometimes the quilt's just going to be screaming for following all the lines because you really want to accentuate those shapes. Or sometimes you want to add a new shape, right? There's all sorts of fun things. I love seeing everyone's results when they're quilting. So good luck. And if you have any questions, let us know. Happy quilting, happy sewing, have an awesome day.